They say the desert doesn't forgive. I learned that the night the fire came. Flames swallowed my home, my wife's laughter turned to smoke, and the wind carried nothing but ash. I should have died there, like everything I loved, but I didn't. I survived, and that's when I became a ghost in my own story, riding the endless plains where the horizon burned like hell itself. Every step of my horse stirred dust that sparkled in the last light, whispering secrets of a land that remembers blood. I hadn't spoken to another soul in weeks until I saw her, a girl no older than 12, alone, trembling, clutching an empty canteen like it was her last lifeline. Her eyes met mine, fierce and terrified all at once, and for a moment, the wind held its breath. I gave her the last of my water, and in her drink, I saw something I thought I'd lost. Hope. That night, under a sky stitched with stars, she told me her name. Nayeli. And with it came a story of survival, of a tribe hunted and scattered, and a world that had forgotten mercy. I promised to protect her, though I knew promises in this land are as fragile as a candle in a storm. From that moment, our fates were bound, traveling through canyons and deserts, always hunted, always searching for something that felt like redemption. Every night brought danger, every day tested our strength. But in her laughter, faint as it was, I found a reason to keep moving. And yet, danger has a way of finding you, even in the quietest places. One morning, we stumbled upon a ghost town, hollowed out and silent, windows like black eyes staring into the soul of anyone who dared enter. The wind carried the scent of old whiskey and forgotten despair. I knew we weren't alone before I even saw the silhouettes. Men with shadows in their eyes, rifles glinting in the sunlight, waiting like predators. I tightened my grip on my revolver, heart hammering, every muscle coiled for what was coming. Nayeli pressed herself close to me, tiny and trembling. But there was fire in her gaze, too, the kind that refused to die. I whispered, "Stay behind me," and she nodded, trusting me in a way no one ever had. Gunfire erupted, echoing off the empty buildings like the cries of the lost. We ducked and ran, bullets tearing holes in wood and dust alike. Somewhere in that chaos, I realized this wasn't just survival. It was war, a reckoning long overdue. We escaped into the canyon, breath ragged, dust choking our lungs. Yet even as we ran, the promise I made to protect her strengthened me. Days bled into nights, the desert stretching endless, merciless, yet alive with whispers of the past. We scavenged what we could, shared stories under starlight, and slowly, an unlikely bond formed. Her laughter carving out a space in the hollow of my heart, my stories teaching her the hard truths of the world. She learned to track, to read the wind, to hear the quiet warning before disaster struck. And I learned that hope can bloom in the most unexpected soil, even amidst ash and sorrow. One evening, as we camped by a dry riverbed, a rattlesnake slithered close, its warning hiss slicing the silence. Nayeli froze, her small body rigid with fear. But I moved without thinking, hands steady, and killed it before it struck. She gasped and then laughed, a brittle, sharp sound that reminded me that life refuses to be tamed, no matter how cruel the world gets. But joy was fleeting, fragile as the desert flower that blooms for a single dawn. The next morning, we discovered the remnants of another homestead, burned, scarred, the footprints of cruelty fresh in the sand. I traced them, heart sinking. These weren't just random men. They were the same outlaws, the same shadows that had stolen my life once before. Rage simmered beneath my skin. Yet I held it at bay for Nayeli's sake. "We survive first," I said, voice low. "Then we settle scores." She nodded solemnly, understanding more than her years should allow. Weeks passed and our journey became a test of endurance and spirit. Nights were cold, stars indifferent to our struggle. Yet the bond between us deepened. Nayeli would wake before dawn whispering to the world, and I would watch the horizon, thinking of the home that once was and the life that could be again. One evening we stumbled upon a hidden grove, a sliver of green in the endless ochre, where water pooled and birds still sang. For the first time we rested, letting the sun warm our tired bones. I watched her play by the water's edge, tiny hands skimming the surface, eyes wide with wonder. In that moment, the weight of loss lifted slightly. The world still had pockets of grace. But nightfall brought more than darkness. It brought the echo of footsteps. Shadows moved in the periphery, deliberate, silent. Outlaws. I drew my revolver, heart thundering, as they surrounded the grove, eyes cold and hungry. Nayeli clutched my arm, fear gripping her small body. I whispered, "Not today," and fired, each shot a promise, a warning, a claim that we would not fall without a fight. The skirmish was brutal, dust and blood mixing with sweat and the scent of gunpowder. I fought like a man possessed, fueled by rage and a desperate need to protect. Nayeli dodged, ran, and I covered her. Until the last man fell, groaning into the dirt, the desert reclaiming its silence. We stood there, breathing hard, watching the stars blink alive in the sky above. The danger had passed, but the world had not changed. I turned to Nayeli, brushing the dust from her hair, and for the first time in weeks, we smiled. Survival was a battle, yes, but moments like this reminded me that hope could endure, that even in the Wild West, miracles were possible. I knew the journey ahead would test us in ways we couldn't yet imagine. There would be more fire, more blood, more betrayal. But I also knew this. As long as she was with me, as long as we kept moving, there was a chance to reclaim what we had lost, to find redemption in a world that had almost forgotten mercy. And so we rode, shadows against the dying light, hearts beating in sync with the rhythm of the desert, each mile a defiance, each breath a promise, each moment a flicker of hope in a land that gave little to those who dared to dream. The desert never sleeps, but that night I felt it watching, waiting, patient and cruel. The firelight from our camp flickered against the canyon walls, casting monstrous shadows that danced in rhythm with the wind. Nayeli slept lightly, her small body curled close to mine, and I could feel her heartbeat, steady yet fragile. I envied it. Mine was a drum of war and grief, a cadence hardened by loss yet softened in her presence. Morning came silent and gray, a fog rolling over the sand like a warning. We saddled our horses, the leather creaking, and rode through the mist, every sense alert. The world was quiet, too quiet, and that always meant trouble. I had learned to read the desert like a book, the way a vulture circled high, the faint shimmer of footprints in the sand, the sudden silence of birds. Something was out there. By noon, the tracks confirmed it. A wagon, heavy with cargo, moving fast but erratic. Outlaws, likely the same who had tormented my life before. My hand hovered over my revolver, but I didn't act rashly. Nayeli, sensing my tension, whispered, "They're close, aren't they?" Her voice trembled, but there was steel beneath the fear. "Too close," I admitted, scanning the horizon. We trailed them at a distance, keeping to the shadows, every muscle coiled. The wagon eventually stopped near a dry riverbed, the men careless, their laughter echoing against the rocks. I counted 5, maybe 6, armed, greedy, and dangerous. One carried a small chest, polished and gleaming like it held the world. We circled the riverbed, waiting for nightfall, each moment a test of patience. I told Nayeli to stay low, and she obeyed, watching me like a hawk studies its prey. As darkness swallowed the land, we moved in. I crept behind the wagon, every step calculated. The men were drinking, careless, the smell of whiskey thick in the air. With a deep breath, I made my move, swift, precise, a shadow among shadows. One went down before he could scream. The others spun, eyes wide, reaching for weapons too late. I didn't hesitate. Nayeli's eyes were wide but steady, understanding the necessity, the rules of survival in a world that had no mercy. By the time the last gunshot echoed into the canyon, silence fell, heavier than before. We took the chest, pried it open, and found gold coins, silver, and papers that hinted at deals with men who ruled towns from behind velvet curtains. Riches, yes, but also danger. We couldn't linger. The outlaws would return, and if they did, they would bring more than fire. They would bring vengeance. That night, as we rode away under a sky smeared with stars, Nayeli asked, "What will we do with it?" I looked at her, small hands gripping the chest, and realized that for the first time I had choices. "We survive first," I said. "Then we decide what kind of justice this world deserves." Days turned into weeks, and the desert's trials became our constant companions. Hunger gnawed at us, thirst burned our throats. But each obstacle forged a bond stronger than any storm. Nayeli grew bolder, learning to shoot, to move without sound, to read the wind and the whispering sand. And I, hardened by years of sorrow, softened in the spaces she carved with laughter and innocence. But peace remained elusive. One afternoon, while foraging near a ridge, we encountered a man lying in the sun, wounded and bleeding. He looked like a ghost, ragged, eyes hollow. I approached cautiously. "Help me," he whispered. "Please." I hesitated, weighing risk against mercy. Nayeli tugged at my sleeve. "We can't just leave him." I nodded, knowing she was right, and helped him to our camp. His name was Silas, a former lawman betrayed by his own town, left for dead by men he had once sworn to uphold. As he recovered, he told stories of corruption, of sheriffs who burned down homesteads to collect insurance, of outlaws who wore badges and called it justice. I listened, understanding all too well. That night, around the fire, Silas offered a plan, one that could give us leverage, a way to reclaim more than just survival. It involved towns, riches, and faces from my past I had hoped never to see again. Nayeli listened, eyes wide, but trusting. "We can do this," she said softly. And I believed her. Weeks passed as we moved cautiously, striking only when necessary, always staying ahead of the men who sought us. Our legend began to grow in whispers across the desert towns, the mysterious rancher and the lost girl, striking from the shadows, elusive as smoke. But every victory carried a cost. One night we were ambushed near a canyon, and Silas was taken, dragged screaming into the darkness. Nayeli and I fought, but the numbers were too great. I was forced to retreat, heart breaking, rage boiling like molten metal. The desert swallowed our cries. For days I tracked them, following the trail of cruelty, every mile a torment, every night a reminder that mercy was scarce. Nayeli never left my side. She became more than a companion. She was a mirror, reflecting the hope I had buried, a compass guiding me through the moral wilderness of vengeance and survival. Finally, we found the outlaws' camp, deep in a hidden canyon, guarded and cruel. I watched from the shadows, heart hammering. Silas was there, battered but alive, chained to a post, defiance in his eyes despite the blood. The wind carried the scent of gunpowder and fear, mixing with the earth. The smell of life and death entwined. I whispered to Nayeli, "Tonight, we take back what's ours." Under the cloak of darkness, we moved, silent as death, striking swiftly, each shot precise, each move calculated. Nayeli's small frame was a shadow among shadows, and together we became a force of fury and determination. By dawn, the outlaws lay defeated, their weapons scattered, the canyon echoing with the last groans of their arrogance. Silas freed himself and embraced us, gratitude mingled with disbelief. But there was no time to savor victory. The world beyond the canyon waited, corrupt towns, more outlaws, and the ever-present threat of the lawless. We rode on, carrying not just gold and vengeance, but lessons learned in fire and blood. The journey was far from over, yet for the first time I felt a spark that maybe, just maybe, the world could be tamed, if only in the small, fleeting moments we carved from it. Nights were still cold, winds still cruel, yet each day Nayeli and I found fragments of life, flowers in hidden crevices, streams of crystal water, and the laughter of two souls bound by survival. Every mile we traveled, every danger we faced, strengthened us. The desert had tried to break us, to turn us into ghosts of our former selves, but instead, it forged a family, born of ash and hope. And as the sun bled into the horizon each evening, I realized something profound. Even in a land of endless hardship, courage, loyalty, and a flicker of hope could change the story. One morning we reached a ridge overlooking a town we had never seen. Smoke rose from chimneys, horses trotted along dust-covered streets, and children ran with innocent laughter. It was a reminder of what we were fighting for, a glimpse of a world that could be ours. Nayeli's eyes shone with wonder, and I smiled beneath the brim of my hat, feeling something I had not felt in years. Possibility. But I knew better than to trust the calm. Storms were coming, both from the past and the present. The world was relentless, yet so were we, and together we would face it. The town below shimmered in the haze of morning, quiet yet alive, a fragile illusion of peace. Nayeli and I watched from the ridge, the wind whipping dust across our faces, carrying with it the scent of hay, smoke, and horses. For the first time, the weight of our journey pressed against me. Not the desert, not the outlaws, but the truth that the final act was upon us. Silas had left at dawn to scout the town, his silhouette swallowed by the morning light, leaving us alone to prepare. I checked my revolver. Every bullet counted, every mechanism oiled and ready. Nayeli sat beside me, her small hands trembling slightly as she loaded her pistol. "Are you scared?" I asked, and she didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were fierce, unflinching, a mirror of the courage I had fought to protect. "No," she said finally, "but I know we have to be ready." That was enough. Hours passed in tense silence, the town below unknowing, unaware that its fate teetered on the edge of our decision. When Silas returned, he brought news. The sheriff was corrupt, allied with the outlaws who had haunted me for years. The law itself had betrayed the people. That meant there would be no allies, no reinforcements, only us. I nodded, jaw tight. Justice, if it came at all, would come by our hands. We moved at dusk, shadows slipping between the buildings, silent as the grave. Nayeli's small figure mirrored mine perfectly, and together we were almost invisible, almost untouchable. We approached the saloon first, the heart of corruption, the epicenter of cruelty. Inside, the sheriff and the remaining outlaws laughed, counting gold, oblivious to the storm about to descend upon them. I waited in the alley, feeling the old anger boil, the fire of vengeance that had fueled me since my home burned. Nayeli's hand brushed mine, a silent signal. We struck, swift and precise. Revolvers barked, chairs splintered, and the room erupted in chaos. Nayeli moved like a shadow, taking down one man after another, her small hands steady despite the fear in her eyes. I fired, heart pounding, the recoil familiar, comforting, a rhythm I had known for years. The sheriff drew his gun, eyes wild, and I met him in the center of the saloon. We circled, careful, calculating. One wrong move, and it would end in death. But I had learned patience, endurance, and the unforgiving nature of the desert. Finally, I drew, faster, surer. The bullet found its mark, and the sheriff crumpled, the room falling silent, except for the echo of our breathing and the settling dust. Outside, the town had begun to stir. People peeked from windows and doorways, afraid but curious. They had known tyranny, and now they glimpsed justice. Nayeli and I didn't wait. We moved through the streets, leaving behind defeated outlaws. Their reign ended. Their power dissolved. Silence returned, thick and heavy. Yet it felt different this time. It was not oppression. It was relief. The quiet of possibility. In the town square, children began to play again, laughter returning like a fragile wind. Adults emerged cautiously, eyes wary, yet gratitude glimmered. I realized then that vengeance alone was not the goal. It was a step toward something greater. Hope, restoration, the chance to rebuild. But the work was not done. One man remained, a figure from my past, the one who had orchestrated the fire that had taken everything. He had watched from the shadows, waiting for his moment. I found him on the edge of town, his expression smug, confident that the desert and time had broken me. I felt the old rage rise, but I controlled it, channeling it with the precision the desert had taught me. "It ends today," I said, voice low, steady. He laughed, and it was a sound I knew too well, the arrogance of a man who believes himself untouchable. I didn't answer with words. I acted. The fight was brutal but brief, a blur of fists, gunfire, and determination. Nayeli watched, hidden, learning the final lesson I could teach her. Courage in the face of darkness, justice forged in the crucible of survival. When it was over, he lay defeated, alive but powerless, stripped of authority, a shadow of his former terror. I spared him, not out of mercy, but because his fear was punishment enough. The town, now free from tyranny, looked to us with a mixture of awe and gratitude. Silas returned, nodding in approval, and for the first time I allowed myself to breathe, to feel the weight of victory settle gently on my shoulders. We had survived fire, betrayal, and the endless desert, and we had emerged stronger, tempered by every hardship. Nayeli approached me, her small hand brushing mine, a silent acknowledgement of all we had endured. "We did it," she whispered, and I nodded. Yes, we had done it. But more than that, we had reclaimed our lives, our right to hope, our ability to dream once again. Days passed and the town began to rebuild, people returning to their routines, laughter and life weaving through the streets like fragile threads of gold. I stayed close to Nayeli, teaching her not just survival, but the delicate art of living in a world that often sought to crush the spirit. We planted gardens in hidden corners, helped mend homes, and slowly, the scars of violence began to fade, replaced by the slow, steady pulse of renewal. Yet the desert remained, vast and indifferent, a reminder that life is never truly safe, that danger can return at any moment. But we were ready. We had faced the worst, survived, and learned that even in the harshest wilderness, light could be found. One evening, under a sky ablaze with the colors of sunset, I rode with Nayeli to the edge of town, watching as the horizon swallowed the last of the sun. She turned to me, eyes shining with the promise of tomorrow. "What now?" she asked softly. I looked at her, small yet unbreakable, and smiled. "Now," I said, "we live. We find new stories, new chances, and we make sure hope never dies, no matter what the desert throws at us." Together, we rode into the evening, the wind carrying our laughter, dust trailing behind like a banner. The past was behind us, the future uncertain, but our hearts were unbroken. And in that moment, I understood what the desert had taught me. Survival is more than endurance. It's the courage to love, to fight, and to believe that even in a land of hardship and betrayal, miracles can bloom. The rancher and the lost girl had become legends, not for the vengeance they wielded, but for the hope they carried, for the lives they touched, and for the quiet strength that refused to die. And as the stars blinked awake in the vast, indifferent sky, I knew one thing for certain. As long as we had each other, the desert could never truly conquer us. The desert had quieted, but only in appearance. Beneath the stillness, something stirred. A threat unseen but felt, like the pulse of the earth warning of a coming storm. Nayeli and I rode along the canyon edge, eyes scanning the horizon, ears tuned to the whisper of wind through the rocks. The town we had saved lay behind us, a fragile pocket of hope. Yet the world beyond remained unyielding, full of men who thrived on greed and cruelty. The gold we had recovered, though spent wisely to aid the townsfolk, had painted targets on our backs. I could feel it, the weight of unseen eyes tracking us, plotting, waiting. We moved cautiously, teaching Nayeli to trust her instincts even more, to sense danger before it arrived. The girl had grown strong, quick, unafraid to act when necessary, yet still capable of hope, a light I clung to as fiercely as she clung to me. One night, as the moon rose cold and silver over the ridges, we stumbled upon a narrow canyon shrouded in mist. The scent of smoke was faint, almost imperceptible, but familiar. I froze, memories of fire and betrayal pressing against my chest. Nayeli sensed my tension. "What is it?" she whispered, her voice low but steady. "Trouble," I said, scanning the shadows. "Something's waiting." We moved carefully, the canyon narrowing, walls high and unyielding. Then I saw them, figures emerging, cloaked in black dust and menace. Outlaws. Not the ones we had faced before, but a new gang, vicious and skilled. Men who thrived in chaos and darkness. I pulled Nayeli close, whispering, "Stay ready. Stay quiet." They surrounded us swiftly, cutting off escape, and I realized the fight we had survived was only the beginning. Bullets tore the air around us, splintering rock and kicking up sand. I fired, each shot precise, a heartbeat of fury and desperation. Nayeli moved beside me, her small frame a whirlwind of courage, disarming and striking with a skill I had honed in months of survival. The canyon became a battlefield, echoing with gunfire, the air thick with smoke, dust, and the metallic tang of blood. We fought as one, bodies moving instinctively, eyes scanning constantly. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes, and finally, silence fell again. The outlaws were down, groaning, wounded, defeated. We were alive, but the cost was clear. Our horses were exhausted, supplies low, and the desert unforgiving. We pressed on, deeper into the wilderness, seeking refuge in hidden groves and dry riverbeds. There, under the canopy of stars, we tended wounds, shared what little food we had, and reflected on the journey so far. Nayeli's gaze, bright despite the hardships, reminded me why I continued. Survival was not enough. Life itself was worth the struggle. Days blurred into nights as we tracked the gang responsible for the attacks. Clues led us across jagged ridges, through abandoned mining towns, and into the shadows of mountains where even the wind dared not whisper. We learned their patterns, their weaknesses, their reliance on fear. And slowly a plan formed, not just to survive, but to end the cycle of violence permanently. We struck at dawn, moving like shadows through the town where the gang had holed up. I signaled Nayeli, and together we entered the saloon where the men counted spoils, arrogant and careless. Our approach was silent, precise. The first shot rang, chaos erupting instantly. Nayeli moved like a trained warrior, taking down one man after another, her eyes burning with determination. I confronted their leader, a man larger and crueler than the rest, his smirk fading as my bullet found its mark. Outside, townsfolk watched in awe, sensing a justice they had never known. The gang fled into the hills, wounded but alive, their reign shattered. We did not chase. The desert would claim them. Instead, we returned to the town we had saved, greeted by cautious but hopeful faces. Life began to reclaim the streets. Horses trotted, laughter returned, children ran without fear. I felt a sense of accomplishment, yet knew our story was far from over. The desert had taught me that survival was temporary, hope fleeting, but courage and unity could create lasting change. Nayeli, now stronger, wiser, had become more than a companion. She was a beacon, a reason to keep moving forward despite the scars and losses we carried. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, we stood on the ridge overlooking the town. The wind whispered secrets, and I understood that peace, even fleeting, was something worth defending. "We've come far," Nayeli said softly, her hand brushing mine. I nodded, heart full. "And we'll go further," I replied, eyes scanning the endless desert beyond. We rode into the night, shadows against the fading light, hearts unbroken, spirits unyielding. The world would continue to challenge us, to test our strength and resolve. But together, we had become unstoppable. A rancher and a lost girl, survivors, warriors, and guardians of hope. And as the stars ignited above the vast, indifferent desert, I knew one truth that no fire, no betrayal, and no darkness could erase. As long as we had each other, the Wild West could never conquer our hearts. The sun sank behind the desert ridges, painting the sky in fire and gold. Nayeli's hand gripped mine, steady and strong, a reminder of all we had survived. The town below buzzed with life again, laughter replacing fear, hope returning where despair had ruled. I breathed in the warm, dusty air, letting the weight of vengeance, loss, and survival lift from my shoulders. "What now?" she asked softly. I smiled, eyes on the horizon. Now, we live. Together we rode into the fading light, shadows against the endless desert, unbroken, free, and full of hope.